presentations. We have election navigation and the impact of the artificial intelligence. We have the register recorder from the county, Dean Logan, along with the assistant, Amin Bular, both here for presentations. The floor is yours.
While they're walking up to the podium, and they have a presentation, I was really delighted that Dean Logan and Amir could be here today because they are experts in the field. Los Angeles County is an extremely important part of the national system when it comes to elections, and I thought it would be really helpful to hear what's going on as how we're going to be handling AI and a lot of the potential dangers that are coming up in this next election. So we're delighted to have you both here, and take it away.
Great, thank you so much. Good evening. I'm Dean Logan. I'm the Registrar Recorder County Clerk. It's a pleasure to be here. Always appreciate hearing from Jackie. We typically work with Jackie in her capacity as one of the commissioners of the county's Quality and Productivity Commission, and she's been a great champion for a number of initiatives that our department has participated in. This particular topic is timely. We're 13 days out from, or 12 days out from Election Day for our statewide presidential primary election. And we're in a new era of threats and security when it comes to elections. When I started as an election administrator, I won't tell you how many years ago, but too many years ago, security was about physical security. It was about making sure that we had transparency and people in the room who provided checks and balances. Today, in this country, election security means that we also have to have on our teams cybersecurity experts who are trying to detect intrusions into our networks of our database of registered voters. We have to have about suspicious substances coming in and vote by mail ballots. So we now have trained canine units who are checking the vote by mail ballots when they come into our facilities. And that's unfortunately just the reality that we operate in. Many of those, I only bring that up to get to the topic of the evening, but I bring that up to say that a lot of those things are really intended, or we believe are intended, to be disruptive of the elections process, not necessarily to specifically manipulate a vote total or anything else, but simply to disrupt the process. The idea that if an envelope comes in with a suspicious substance and that shuts down ballot processing, then that means we don't have election results, or we don't have the ability to demonstrate that everybody's ballot was counted. So it is a new era. We have a number of programs and a very robust security protocol to address those issues. Things like a network security operations center that operates 24/7, the K9 unit I talked about. But I think the other thing that's really affecting elections in the country right now is the proliferation of mis and disinformation. And in many respects, we can talk about cybersecurity, we can talk about physical security, we can talk about procedural security, all very important. But those, in many respects, are things that we can address through proper protocols and through proper expertise. Mis and disinformation, in some respects, is far more dangerous because it spreads so quickly, and we don't have the ability to respond or change it. Once it's out there, it's hard to reel it back. And now what we're seeing, and I really want to recognize and acknowledge your plan to have the General Assembly on this topic in March, is the impact of the combination of mis and disinformation and the use of artificial intelligence. And we're seeing that mostly right now, seeing that in terms of impacting campaigns. So we saw that in the New Hampshire presidential primary, where there was a deep fake audio robocall that was put out that imitated the voice of President Biden and indicated a different election date than the actual election date. We're seeing that in even internationally in artificial intelligence through deepfake videos and audio that are saying that our borders are open. And I think there's a good argument to say the timing of that has to do with the fact that we're in a presidential election cycle. So it's something we're very aware of that can impact the conduct of elections, but not something that we have direct control over. So we're monitoring that very closely. Amin Buller, our CIO, and I had the opportunity to go last month to a summit at Columbia University that was a data collection effort specifically about the potential of artificial intelligence disrupting elections in the United States. And it was a hands-on workshop where we sat at tables and we used some of these large learning models, these applications like ChatGPT and others, and we fed questions about elections into these systems. And then the data collection was, we were to rate the answers that were coming out of the models for accuracy, whether it was deceptive, whether it was harmful, whether it was incomplete or out of context. And it was a fascinating process for me, and Amin will probably talk about this a little bit more, but you can immediately, when you go through that process, you can see the appeal of it, right? The conversational nature, the ease of just going to your personal device and saying, hey, can I trust elections in LA County? Or can you register to vote on election day in California? Questions that are, that would be reasonable questions for voters to ask or potential voters to ask. And in many respects, there were nuggets of really good information in the responses. But what was concerning was how quickly the answers would evolve into editorial comments that have been collected from different places, subjective information, and quickly became very deceptive, or simply lacked the context to tell you what it meant. So we know that those applications are being used. We understand the appeal of them. We know that we can't make them go away, but I think what we're committed to in our department, as well as with our colleagues across the nation, is trying to figure out how do we best educate the public on where they can get trusted information about the elections process, where they can validate the information that they're getting off of these models, and behind the scenes, how can we work with the companies and the technology innovators that are putting these together to find ways to make sure that we're increasing the accuracy and the legitimacy of that information that is being used. So Amin is going to walk you through a slide deck to talk a little bit about what we've observed and how that process works. He is always a good balance for me, because we also, in an operation our size, in a county like this where we have 5.7 million registered voters, and all of those operations I talked about, we actually use artificial intelligence in our operations, and we use it effectively, and it actually aids us in doing the work we're doing. So we want to be cautious and balanced in our response to it here in LA County, that there is value to the technology and to implementing it in a positive direction, but also to be cautious and careful in how we do that, and make sure that we are a voice for the electorate and making sure that they get accurate and complete information. So I'll turn it over to Amin, and he will get into a little bit more detail.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dean. Next slide, please. So before I jump into the presentation, just wanted to give you a context of LA County's Registrar Recorder. Our office deals with scale. We're just dealing with large volume, 5.7 million voters, one of the largest document repositories of the vital records. So just wanted to give you a context that it's pretty complex operations. Next slide, please. Artificial intelligence. Before we dive deeper into it, just want to give a context that artificial intelligence is the ability for machines to start thinking. And I think there are all sorts of information out there. What do you mean by thinking? The way it works is you just feed the computers lots and lots of data points and let it then connect the dots and start predicting what's going to happen. So for example, when you're speaking, or the artificial intelligence computer is planning to answer you, it can predict what word or how to complete the sentence.
My wife can do that.
Artificial intelligence is everywhere. So again, not a new science. It has been there for many years. It's just becoming consumerized. It's now in the hands of consumers, the end users, vast amount of public. Different approaches. Machine learning is a very common approach. People who are in technology can relate to that. Another key point where artificial intelligence can be used is natural language processing. What I mean by that is it can understand natural language, which was not possible in the past. The computers used to be dumb terminals. You just ask it to do something, it used to do it. Now it can interpret what you're trying to say. So there are unique things in our language that only humans so far could identify. Things like yes, yeah, mhm. There can be millions of combinations of how we interact with each other. Computers are now able to interpret the natural language, and it even goes to multiple languages and so forth. You'll see it in subsequent slides. Next slide, please. Another context here, you must have heard about large language models, LLMs. LLMs are nothing but they are just super smart computers or models that are designed to do specific things. And you'll get a context of what large language models are out there. Next slide, please. These are some examples. You must have heard the terms like GPT-3, GPT-4, that is developed by an entity called OpenAI. It's a company, it's a commercial company. BERT was developed by Google. And all of these large language models have a unique application. XLNet, that was done by Google AI in collaboration with Carnegie Mellon University. T5 is Google. BART, that's an interesting one. DALL-E is one of my favorites. So all these LLMs are there developed by someone, some company, some entity, and they are generally unique and they are meant to do something. DALL-E, for example, can paint. Rightfully so, with the name. You say it in words, you just tell a computer to paint something, it will paint. So all these, and this is just a very small list, there are thousands of them. And thousands are being developed every day. So you have to get a context, large language models, it's not just GPT-3. There are thousands others that are there. Next slide, please. Potential, as Dean mentioned, there are definitely a lot of potential. I like to call it, it's a tool. It's a very useful tool. I think I always equate it to an evolutionary spot in human history. This is one of those points in time when humans invented wheel, or when humans discovered how to create fire. It's that pivotal of a moment. So uses are immense. You can definitely use it for increased efficiency, accuracy, transparency. Accessibility is a great tool. Outreach and engagement, chatbots, very easy, very useful. How do you want to reach out to your constituents? You can deploy chatbots. Sentiment analysis. You generally have customer service individuals speaking to your constituents on phones. How did the call go? Was it positive? Was it negative? Was there a tone of anger or not? Was the caller pleased with the service that they received? So sentiment analysis. Election monitoring and cybersecurity, huge use case. We use it ourselves. Predictive analysis and forecasting. In fact, we are using right now different models where can we predict 1 day or 2 days ahead of time how much the turnout is going to be. So we are using it right now. Language translation, again, a huge tool. You just feed some text in English, can it spit out in different languages? I want to make sure that we all understand it's not 100% accurate yet, but it's getting there. With AI, there are always going to be questions about ethics and societal impact. Is AI going to be biased or not? Is the bias going to be with the same degree in which the data, the source data it was provided to or not? Mm-hmm. I think society is still learning a lot about it. There are perceived biases, and we'll talk about that. Maybe algorithms can contain biases. Maybe the source data can contain biases. Next slide, please. Right now, we are using chatbots. So we have chatbots. You go to our website, somebody ask a question, and AI would respond. Of course, there is an option to go to a human at any given time. The humans are monitoring. As Dean mentioned, we have to be careful. We don't want to go all the way in using AI because we want to tread it very carefully. We don't want to give keys of our house to AI yet. Cybersecurity, there's a huge use case there. Audio ballots recording, that's something we do it right now. So we have English language ballots. We translate using human translators in 18 different languages. But we also have to record these ballots in audio for accessibility. To record and generate audio scripts, we use AI. It is proofed by humans. It is approved by humans. It is loaded by humans. But we were able to do the heavy lifting by the machine. Call sentiment analysis, again, how did the call go? Can I get some flags? We're not giving the ability to the computers to make decisions. They just merely flag those calls so that the supervisors or managerial staff can listen to the recording and maybe there's an opportunity to train the staff. Again, no action will be taken by AI or computers. Social media monitoring, in fact, a very, very interesting incident happened where somebody was impersonating Dean Logan, sitting in Montana, using his picture, using his title. We were able to, within seconds, we were able to identify that. Now, remember, this is from the internet. You're talking of millions or billions of data points. Within seconds, we were able to identify and shut it down. So there's a use for that. Next slide, please. Potential misuse, and the good thing is we have mitigations in place for at least the threats that we know right now. Disinformation and manipulation. So maybe people can spread fake news, misinformation, deep fake videos. So we have fact-checking mechanisms and we work with social media platforms. So we work directly with people like Facebook, with Google, so that we can mitigate any amount of deep fake or fake news. Another issue can be potential misuse is voter suppression, targets specific groups of voters with false information. We are monitoring social media using AI tools so that we can stay ahead of the bad guys and we can catch that. Plus, we also have to be proactively providing the correct information to the voters. So that's our mitigation. Security threats. Malicious actors can easily launch cyber attacks. Well, it happens all the time. We have about 600 million events happening during an election timeframe. It's impossible for humans to go through 600 million events. We use AI to see what those probes are. Next slide, please. Biased decision making. So campaign targeting, predicting wrong outcomes of the election. That can happen. We ensure transparency and accountability. We have audits, especially when it comes to the tabulation of ballots. And we also have oversight by independent bodies of our systems. Manipulation of election data. This is an interesting one. People may think AI can manipulate the election data or the results, but in our case, we have very robust data integrity measures. We use cryptographic hashing. I know I'm getting slightly technical here, but an important part is that all our important systems are isolated or air-gapped. They're not connected to the outside world. So if you go to our ballot processing center where the ballots are being counted, that room, those four walls, the system or the network does not go out. So there's absolutely no way an outsider can get in. It's truly air-gapped and isolated network. Next slide, please. Recent incidents, I think Dean mentioned about, a phone message that sounded like President Biden, you all know. The second one is an interesting one where it happened in a commercial space, not related to elections, but very interesting. A CFO of a company apparently sends an email to a bank employee in Hong Kong about transferring some funds. The bank employee got into the meeting with multiple people in a meeting with a video call. And everybody convinced him, including the CFO of the company, that this employee needs to transfer $25 million to an overseas bank account. It so happened that other than that bank employee, everybody else was fake, computer generated. There you go. Bad actors created a persona of multiple people, convinced an employee to transfer. Next. Just wanted to give you a preview of, these are some of the sample videos that are truly generated by AI. These are all fake. This is not an animation. Nobody has drawn anything, what you see here. These are drawn by computers. Someone just, it's not that somebody created a picture of a man or that girl or that forest. The commands were given in plain English language. Create X, Y, and Z. And computer drew these pictures and created these animations. Next slide, please. There are many strategies that you all in your respective offices can help and can support the election officials. First is customized training data. All the data that is given to these LLMs, that definitely you can create your own LLMs as well. Domain-specific fine-tuning. We noticed the workshop that Dean mentioned that it actually lacked context. Where exactly are you asking a question from? So domain-specific fine-tuning is needed. Question answering systems can be created so that these models can be taught over a period of time. Policy and regulation, I think that's very important because how do we regulate AI? If we are using AIs, if your offices are using AIs, you need to have policies around it. You need to have transparency around it. So I think there's a great deal of emphasis on creating policies. Real-time monitoring, always create a team that can that can monitor the results of AI. Multilingual support goes without saying that you can actually provide multilingual support to your constituents, accessibility features, security privacy measures. The next one is very, very interesting and very, very close to me. Collaborate with entities, be an influence, talk to, leverage your connections with the companies that own these LLMs so that you can help get these models better and better. Lastly, build your skill set. Have your dedicated teams in your IT departments, build your skill set. That's very, very important. More you delay, I think we're going to be further behind the curve, the way it's happening right now. So anyways, these are some of the strategies. That concludes my presentation. I hope this was relevant. Any question and answers?
Any questions, my colleagues?
Yes. In honesty, my name is John Cruikshank. I'm running for county supervisor. So of course, this is a huge deal for me. Where does your role begin and end? Like you were saying, you're finding the truth in terms of what's out there. It seems like you want to protect voter integrity, but does it get now into campaign integrity? And where does your role start and stop?
Yeah, I think it's an important question. I appreciate that. I think right now, we're focused on the administration of the election. So being the trusted source of information about the mechanics, like where you vote, when you vote, what were the hours of voting. We know that misuse of artificial intelligence within campaigns can influence the sentiment voters might have in terms of their trust of the process. But with regard to actual campaigns, that's out of our domain. That's another area of regulation. I think where it spills into our area is like the example in New Hampshire where it may have maybe supported or paid for by a campaign, but it's telling people not to vote or telling them to vote on a date that's not the election date. And those are the types of things that we would red flag and want to.
That helps. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question. Hi. I saw your new center, right, that you guys just launched a few days ago. It looked very impressive. I saw the canines, going around. The question to me is 2022, some, cities and county wait a whole month, for the result of the election. So how 2024 is going to be different from 2022?
Yeah, so actually in reality in California,
I know
none of the election results are final until 30 days after the election. And that's because the California legislature has intentionally weighted our election laws to give voters every opportunity to cast a ballot. So that includes now that 80% plus of our turnout is usually through vote by mail ballots. That includes the ability to drop off that ballot at a ballot box up until 8 o'clock on election night, or many voters actually walk their vote by mail ballot into the vote centers where they could vote in person, but they're bringing a vote by mail ballot and dropping it there. Those all have to be processed after election day. So I think to your question, none of the results are final until the end of that period, because we also have to conduct audits of the vote count to make sure that everything was correct. I think where it gets frustrating is when there is a very close margin in a contest and we're required to release new vote totals every other day. And so you end up seeing the contest flip-flop, so on Tuesday, somebody's ahead, on Friday, somebody else is ahead. Next Tuesday, it goes back and forth. And that's clearly frustrating if you're a candidate or somebody engaged in the campaign, and it's very frustrating for the media. But the laws are written in a way to ensure that we get every valid vote counted into those final. And that's not going to change for this election. So the dynamic you're talking about in 2022 will be true in 2024 as well. The question is whether or not we'll see contests with those close margins.
The new center is going to process much faster than before, correct? Because before they do a lot of things manually.
Yeah, I mean, so the processes are very automated. And so the tally process that Amin talked about, that's very fast, but we can only process what we have, right? So if we haven't received it from the US Postal Service, or it hasn't come from the 400 drop boxes throughout the county, that's the process that slows it down. Once we have the ballots, that process goes very quickly.
Very quick. Thank you.
Question. I misunderstood that one little remark. Ballot being walked in when they're voting by mail. Those ballots that are walked in that were being mailed in, but to a voting center, they're counted after all the other votes? Or is this for all the mail-in, they're counted after the people that go into a voting center?
So let me start with the kind of the middle question there is if you take your vote by mail ballot and drop it off on election day at an in-person vote center, that ballot's not going to be counted on election night, because as a vote by mail ballot, it has to come back, it has to go through signature verification. It has to then be separated from the identity of the voter, and we have to physically review that ballot to make sure that there's nothing that would prevent it from being tallied properly. So just to give you an example, in 2022, the day after the election, we had 250,000 ballots that arrived that had to start through that process. And we had a very close race, as you'll recall, for mayor of the city of LA. So there was a lot of scrutiny on that. But I want to be clear that it's not that all vote by mail ballots are counted after all the other ballots. Actually, the first votes that we release election night shortly after 8 o'clock are in fact all of the vote by mail ballots that have been returned up until election day, right? So it is a representative sample of the entire county. So it represents all precincts, all contests, all measures. But then we count what's cast on election day at the vote centers. That's what we do throughout the night on election night. But then the next day we start with a whole new batch of vote by mail ballots that are still continuing to come in.
Okay, thank you.
Personal question. So I broke my hand recently, and I
Worried about your signature?
How precise does your signature need to be? Because when I write, it's in kindergarten. And so I'm curious, like, does that mean I have to vote in person? Or is there a way for me to still vote?
No, it's a great question, and it's pertinent to this whole mis and disinformation thing, because people never believe me when I say this, but we legally are required to check the signature on every vote by mail ballot that comes back. And people all the time will tell us, so, well, there's no way you can do that with, you have millions of ballots. And actually we do, we do that. There's an automated signature verification process that they go through first. If that rejects the signature, then it goes to a manual check. That's usually 3 layers of checks. In a situation like yours, there's a couple of options. One is, I always tell people the best reference signature for you is to look at your driver's license, because most of the registration in California now is coming through DMV. So if your signature matches or is similar to what's on your driver's license, you're probably going to be fine. If your signature doesn't match, though, we are required to proactively reach out to you and give you the opportunity to cure that. That's another part of that 30-day period, right? So that so we would send you a notice and tell you that you need to update your signature. If you know in advance, like in your situation, that the signature is not going to match, then I actually would advise you to go starting this weekend to an in-person vote center and vote in person.
Could you find a candidate 11,000 votes if they called you?
Yeah.
Very good.
Switch votes from you to me.
I think there's a question in the chat. May the public online ask a question if known?
Is there any legislation in California on use of AI in a campaign? For instance, can a campaign use AI to create a deep fake of another candidate and distribute that?
I don't believe that there is any existing law in California that addresses that specific of a question. There are laws in California that prohibit deceptive campaign practices, but they're not specific to AI. Although I believe that there is a bill that's been introduced in this session to address the example of what happened in New Hampshire to make that a campaign violation if you're found to have funded that or to participate.
If you were to crystallize that last slide deck where you're talking to us as local officials, what would you most like us to focus on, given that our budgets are strapped just like yours? But given the fact that your office really has assumed most responsibility for most elections, with very few of our cities now running our. So what would be the most important takeaway, given that our budgets are limited? It's our city clerk's offices that are often in contact with your office. What is it that we can do?
So that, I guess the policy side of that question, I would say is to join the counties across California and the election administrators across California to lobby for the federal government and the state government to pay their fair share of election costs, because right now they don't contribute to election costs. And it's all pushed down to the local level, even though we're on the same ballot with federal and state contests. So I would say from a policy level, that's what I would say. I think administratively, we work very closely with the city clerks to try and streamline the process, to get information out, to look for efficiencies. It is challenging and it's expensive. I mean, for instance, I would not have anticipated a year ago, if one of your cities asked us for an estimate of what it's going to cost to put something on the March 5th ballot, I would not have anticipated that we would be paying a canine unit to have at our ballot processing center. But we have to protect the employees and we have to protect those ballots in order for them to be counted. So it's a challenge. I think together, though, we can start to find efficiencies and try to work together to drive some of those costs down over time. The other thing I would say is really what Aman represented in the presentation, is when you're thinking about how to effectively use artificial intelligence, because that may be an area of efficiency and maybe an area of cost savings for things like translations and stuff like that. It's finding that balance that I talked about in the beginning of how can we do that without putting the process and the integrity at risk. And so the one example I can give you is, so we use a chat bot to enable the most basic questions about elections to be answered on our website and in our call centers. But the difference, and Aman may correct me on this, the difference between a chat bot and one of these large language models is we control the information that the chat bot is gathering the information from the answers on, where the large language models is scouring the internet and pulling that from all sorts of sources. So you're getting editorial comment, you're getting it out of context. So it's that responsible use as a public entity of the tools and making sure that we don't cross over that line where we're allowing the bias to come.
Thank you for that information.
I just want to mention to all of you that we had a city clerk's meeting here today. And we told them about this tonight, and we are taping it. We always tape the council meetings, the board meetings. And so we'll be sending this out probably to the city clerks, and on your board highlights that I send you, we'll be sending a link so that you can have this for your city.
Yeah, and I'll mention that the workshop that we went to at Columbia University, that data collection that they were doing, we're actually going to a briefing tomorrow with the preliminary report, but that should be published before your March summit. So as soon as I get that report, I'll send that to you, Jackie, as well, and you can distribute that to the summit if you wish.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the information. Yes. Make sure everybody have a good signature. Thank you.